At midnight in a wealthy mansion on the outskirts of Seattle, 30-year-old maid Emilia heard a strange sound, the muffled cry of a baby coming from little Sofia's room. Deciding to check, she entered and froze. The girl's father, millionaire Jacob, was doing something unimaginable. That moment changed Emilia's life forever. Confronting her with an injustice she vowed to right without breaking the law. Emilia Rodriguez, a 30-year-old woman with dark eyes and tired hands, slowly dusted the massive oak table in the dining room of the Wilson mansion. Her movements were precise, almost mechanical, the result of 10 years of working as a maid in wealthy Seattle homes. Outside the window, in the garden, the wind rustled the leaves of old maple trees, and the soft moonlight reflected off the glass windows, filling the room with a golden glow. This house, nestled in the hills overlooking Puget Sound, was the epitome of luxury. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, paintings in gilded frames. But for Emilia, it remained a foreign world, beautiful, cold, and unattainable. She loved these late hours when the house fell asleep. Silence enveloped her like an old blanket, giving her rare moments of peace. Finishing her cleaning, Emilia glanced at the antique clock in the corner. The hands were approaching midnight. A little more, and she would be able to go to her small room in the servants' wing, where, under the dim light of the lamp, she would count how much she had managed to save during the week. The dream of a home of her own, however modest, was her beacon in a sea of endless shifts. Every dollar hidden in a tin box under her bed brought her closer to freedom. But tonight, something had gone wrong. Passing by the bedroom of 3-year-old Sofia, the owner's daughter, Emilia stopped. Through the half-open door came a faint, muffled sound, crying. At first, she thought she was imagining things. Maybe it was the wind outside the window, or a toy with a melody that someone had forgotten to turn off. But the sound repeated, thin and trembling, as if a child was trying to hold back tears. Emilia's heart sank. She knew that Sofia was often left alone. Her mother, Natalie Wilson, had disappeared from the house several months ago after a loud argument with her husband, and her father, Jacob, rarely visited the nursery. Emilia hesitated. Her job was to clean, not to interfere. Any unnecessary movement could cost her her job, and without that salary, her dream of a home would collapse like a house of cards. But the crying grew louder, and she couldn't take it anymore. Quietly, almost on tiptoe, she pushed the door open and peeked inside. The room was lit only by the faint light of a star-shaped nightlight, casting shadows on the walls covered with Sofia's drawings. The girl sat in her crib, clutching a stuffed rabbit tightly to her chest, her face wet with tears. Standing next to her was Jacob Wilson. Emilia froze. Jacob, a tall man with sharp features and cold gray eyes, was dressed in a dark suit, as if he had just returned from a business meeting. His voice, low and furious, cut through the silence. "Shut up already. How long are you going to whine?" Sofia sobbed, trying to hide under the blanket, but he yanked it out of her hands. "You're just like your mother. All you do is ruin my life," he barked, and the girl cried even harder. Emilia felt the blood rush to her temples. Her fingers clenched the rag so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She wanted to burst in, scream, snatch Sofia away from this scene, but fear paralyzed her. Jacob Wilson wasn't just her employer. He was one of the most influential men in Seattle. His company, Wilson Tech, owned half of Washington State's technology market. One phone call from him, and Emilia would find herself out on the street with no money. She backed away, closing the door as quietly as she could, and leaned against the wall in the hallway, breathing heavily. Sofia's crying subsided, replaced by occasional sobs. Emilia heard Jacob mutter something indistinct and leave the room. His footsteps echoed across the parquet floor as he walked away toward his study. She waited until everything was quiet, then peeked into the nursery again. Sofia was curled up in a ball, hugging her rabbit, her breathing uneven, but she seemed to have fallen asleep. Emilia carefully adjusted the blanket, trying not to wake the girl, and left, closing the door behind her. Returning to her room, she collapsed onto the bed without turning on the light. The image of tearful Sofia and angry Jacob stood before her eyes. What is he doing to her? Ran through her mind. She knew that something was wrong in this house. Rumors had been circulating among the staff for a long time. Natalie didn't leave just like that, but after Jacob raised his hand to her. Some whispered that he had threatened to take everything from her, her business, her daughter, her reputation. but no one dared to speak about it openly. Emilia pulled a tin box from under the bed and counted the money, just over $3,000. It was far from enough for the first payment on a house, but every cent was her ticket to freedom. She sighed, hid the box back under the bed, and lay down, staring at the ceiling. She didn't feel like sleeping. Instead, she thought about Sofia. Why had Natalie abandoned her daughter? And what was Jacob hiding behind his expensive suits and authoritative tone? The next day, Emilia decided to observe. She did her work as usual, mopped the floors, polished the silver, dusted the endless shelves. But now her ears caught every sound and her eyes every movement. Jacob spent the whole day in his study, talking on the phone in a loud, irritated voice. She caught a glimpse of Sofia. The girl was sitting in the playroom, surrounded by toys, but her gaze was empty, like a doll's. Emilia tried to talk to her, offering her a cookie from the kitchen, but Sofia just took it silently and turned away. By evening, a new figure appeared in the house. Lauren Garcia, a 25-year-old nanny, entered the mansion with a suitcase and a haughty smile. Jacob had hired her, announcing to the staff that the child needs care. Lauren was tall, with sharp cheekbones and cold brown eyes. She barely nodded to Emilia, muttering a quick hello, and immediately headed for the nursery. Emilia felt a pang of anxiety. There was something about this woman she didn't like, too self-assured, too aloof. That night, Emilia heard crying again. This time she didn't go to the nursery. She was afraid of running into Lauren or, worse, Jacob. But in the morning, as she passed the playroom, she noticed Sofia sitting in the corner, pale and silent. An untouched plate of breakfast stood on the table. Lauren, meanwhile, was sitting on the sofa, scrolling through her phone without even looking at the girl. Emilia pressed her lips together. Her patience was wearing thin, but she knew that to help Sofia, she had to be smarter. She had to find a way to expose what was going on, and do it in such a way that the truth would come out. She didn't yet know that this moment would be the beginning of a chain of events that would turn her life upside down. But one thing was clear. There was a dark secret brewing in this house, and Emilia couldn't stay out of it. Emilia Rodriguez woke up at dawn, although she had only managed to sleep for a couple of hours. Her small room in the servants' wing of the Wilson mansion smelled of old wood and cleaning products, which she had absorbed over years of work. The first rays of sunlight streamed through the narrow window, illuminating Seattle, sprawled below on Puget Sound. She reached for the tin box under her bed where she kept her savings, $3,120. The amount had grown slowly but steadily, like a plant pushing its way through the asphalt. Emilia sighed, hid the box back under the bed, and got up. Today was another day of cleaning, but her thoughts were not on the dust on the shelves, but on Sofia, the 3-year-old girl whose cry she had heard last night. Going down to the kitchen, Emilia made herself a strong cup of coffee. The rest of the staff, the cook, Rosa, and the cleaning lady, Carla, were already bustling about the stove, preparing breakfast for Jacob and his new nanny, Lauren Garcia. Rosa, a plump woman with kind eyes, glanced quickly at Emilia. "Are you all right, dear? You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, stirring the oatmeal. Emilia nodded, but said nothing. She couldn't tell them what she had seen. Jacob yelling at Sofia, his anger making the little girl tremble in her crib. It was too personal, too dangerous. The day passed as usual. Emilia scrubbed the marble floors in the hall, cleaned the silver candlesticks, and wiped the mirrors until her fingers ached. But her gaze kept returning to Lauren. The nanny, dressed in a strict black sweater and jeans, looked as if she had come not to work but to pose for a magazine. She sat in the living room, buried in her phone, while Sofia played with blocks in the corner. Emilia noticed that the girl had hardly eaten. Her plate of porridge was untouched. "Can I get her something?" Emilia asked, unable to resist. Lauren looked up and smiled coldly. "I'll take care of it. You clean up, and the child is my responsibility." Her tone was sharp, like a lash from a whip. But Lauren's concern turned out to be empty words. In the evening, as Emilia was finishing cleaning the dining room, she heard familiar crying. She froze, listening. The sound was coming from the nursery, but now it was quieter, as if Sofia had grown tired of crying. Emilia dropped the rag and ran up the stairs, her heart pounding. The door to the room was ajar. Peering inside, she saw the girl sitting on the floor with a stuffed rabbit in her arms. Her face was red from crying, and an overturned bottle of milk lay nearby. Lauren was not in the room. Emilia couldn't take it anymore. She went in, quietly closing the door behind her, and knelt down in front of Sofia. "Hey, sweetie, are you hungry?" she whispered, reaching out her hand. Sofia looked at her with big teary eyes and nodded. Emilia picked up the bottle, checked to see if the milk was cold, and gave it to the girl. The child clung to her greedily, and Emilia, sitting next to her, began to hum an old lullaby that her mother had sung to her when she was a child. Duerme, menina, duerme sin temor. Sofia calmed down, her eyelids slowly closed, and soon she fell asleep, nestling against Emilia. This moment was interrupted by the creaking of the floorboards. Emilia turned around. Lauren was standing in the doorway. Her gaze was icy, her lips pressed into a thin line. "What are you doing here?" she asked, crossing her arms. Emilia stood up, trying to speak calmly. She was crying. "I just fed her." Lauren took a step closer, her voice threatening. "Listen here, maid. I'm the nanny here. If I see you with that child again, you'll be sorry." Emilia clenched her fists but said nothing. Lauren turned and left, slamming the door behind her. Emilia couldn't sleep that night. She lay in the dark, listening to the rain drumming on the roof. Her thoughts revolved around Sofia and Lauren. Something was wrong with that nanny. She was too cold, too indifferent. And then she remembered the laughter she had heard from the guest room the night before. Deciding to check, Emilia threw on a jacket and quietly slipped out into the hallway. The house was asleep, with only a faint light coming from under Jacob's study door. But her destination was elsewhere, the guest room on the second floor. As she got closer, she heard muffled voices. The door was slightly ajar, and Emilia peeked inside. Lauren and Jacob were sitting on the sofa, a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses in front of them. Lauren was laughing, her head thrown back, and Jacob was whispering something in her ear, his hand on her shoulder. Emilia recoiled, her heart pounding. She couldn't believe her eyes. While Sofia was crying alone, her nanny and father were entertaining themselves as if the girl didn't exist. Returning to her room, Emilia collapsed into a chair and covered her face with her hands. She was shaking with anger and helplessness. She wanted to rush in there, scream, demand an explanation, but she knew that would be the end of her job. Jacob would not tolerate interference, and Lauren had already made it clear that she was against her. In the morning, at breakfast, she shared her thoughts with Rosa. The cook listened, shaking her head. "Emilia, dear, stay away. That Lauren is a snake, and the boss, he's not who he says he is. They say Natalie left because he threatened her. Don't get involved. You'll lose everything." But Emilia couldn't forget Sofia. The next evening, she heard crying again. This time, she didn't go to the nursery right away. She was afraid of Lauren. Instead, she waited until the nanny went to her room, and only then did she sneak up to Sofia. The girl was lying in her crib, her blanket crumpled, her pillow covering her face. Emilia removed the pillow, her heart sinking in horror. Sofia was suffocating from her tears, but she was alive. She picked up the girl and rocked her until she fell asleep. "I won't leave you," Emilia whispered, feeling a determination grow within her. In the morning, Carla noticed her tired appearance and shook her head. "You were with the child again, weren't you?" "Emilia, this is not your concern. If Lauren or the master find out, you're finished." Emilia nodded, but she knew in her heart that she would not back down. Her conscience would not allow her to remain silent, and her heart was breaking with pity for Sofia. She knew she was standing on the edge of a precipice. One wrong step, and she would lose her job, her dream, her future. But every cry from the little girl was like a knife stabbing her soul. By evening, the tension had reached its peak. Emilia was cleaning the hall when she heard Lauren and Jacob laughing again in the guest room. She gripped the mop so tightly that her fingers turned white. Her patience snapped. She decided it was time to act. But how? Should she go to the authorities? Tell someone? Or continue to help secretly, risking everything? Emilia didn't know the answer yet. But one thing was clear. Lauren had become her enemy, and Sofia was the reason she was willing to fight. That night changed everything, and there was no turning back. Emilia Rodriguez stood in the dark hallway of the Wilson mansion, clutching a mop like a weapon. Outside, Seattle was shrouded in night fog, and the house was enveloped in a heavy silence, broken only by distant laughter from the guest room. Lauren and Jacob were there again, their voices mingling with the clinking of glasses, while 3-year-old Sofia lay alone in her crib. Emilia felt anger boiling inside her, but she knew that an open confrontation with the master of the house or the nanny would mean a ticket out of there with no money in her pocket. Her dream of a home, which she had worked for years to achieve, was hanging by a thread. And yet the image of Sofia suffocating under the pillow last night would not leave her alone. She decided to proceed with caution. In the morning, while Jacob was in his study and Lauren was sleeping off another night out, Emilia sneaked into the nursery. Sofia was sitting on the floor, playing with a worn-out stuffed rabbit. Her eyes were red, but she smiled weakly when she saw Emilia. "Hungry?" she asked quietly, handing the girl an apple she had taken from the kitchen. Sofia nodded and began to nibble on the fruit, while Emilia sat down next to her and stroked her head. "I'll find a way to help you, sweetie," she whispered, although she had no idea how. The days dragged on, and the tension in the house grew. Jacob became even more irritable, yelling at the staff for any reason. The coffee was too hot. The carpet was uneven. Lauren behaved as if she owned the mansion, giving orders, ignoring Sofia, and openly flirting with the owner. Emilia tried to keep out of the limelight, but her secret visits to the girl did not go unnoticed. Carla, a tired-looking cleaning lady, caught her by the arm in the kitchen. "You went to see the child again, didn't you?" "Emilia, I warned you. Lauren is watching you." "She's not stupid," Carla hissed, looking around. Emilia clenched her teeth. "I can't stand seeing Sofia suffer." Carla sighed. "Then be prepared for the consequences." The consequences were not long in coming. On Friday, Jacob threw a party, one of those noisy gatherings where businessmen in expensive suits drank whiskey and discussed deals. The mansion was buzzing with music, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Emilia, as always, stayed behind to clean up after the guests. She picked up broken glass and wiped wine stains from the carpets until her legs began to ache with fatigue. But through all the noise, she heard a familiar sound, Sofia's faint crying. Her heart sank. She dropped the rag and ran up the stairs, trying not to attract attention. The door to the nursery was ajar. Emilia peeked inside and froze. Sofia was lying in her crib, her face covered with a pillow, her little hands twitching slightly. The crying grew quieter, almost inaudible. Emilia rushed into the room, threw aside the pillow, and picked up the girl. Sofia sobbed, her breathing uneven. But she was alive. Who did this? Flashed through Emilia's mind. She knew the answer: Lauren. Only the nanny could be so cruel as to silence a child's cries in such a way. Emilia rocked Sofia until she fell asleep, then put her back in her crib and tucked her in. She was shaking with rage. She couldn't keep quiet any longer. Going downstairs, she saw Lauren in the kitchen, drinking coffee and scrolling through her phone as if nothing had happened. Emilia stepped toward her, her voice trembling. "You covered her with a pillow. She could have suffocated." Lauren looked up, her lips twisted into a smirk. "Prove it," she said, setting down her cup. "You have no right to treat a child like that." "I'll tell Jacob," Emilia blurted out. Lauren stood up, her gaze threatening. "Try it. I'll say you're a thief. Let's see who he believes, you or me." Emilia backed away, feeling the floor slip away beneath her feet. She knew Lauren wasn't bluffing. Her connection to Jacob gave her power, and Emilia was just a maid, a nobody in this house. She spent the night awake, running through options in her head. Go to the police? There was no evidence. Leave? That would mean abandoning Sofia. All she could do was wait and hope that the truth would come out on its own. But in the morning, everything fell apart. Lauren beat her to it. While Emilia was cleaning the fireplace in the living room, Jacob burst into the room, his face red with rage. "What do you think you're doing?" he barked. Emilia looked up, confused. "Lauren said you stole a silver spoon and are meddling in Sofia's affairs. You're fired. Pack your things and get out of here," he shouted, throwing her rag on the floor. Emilia tried to protest. "That's not true. I only wanted to help your daughter." But Jacob cut her off. "You're nobody to meddle in my family's affairs. Don't expect your pay, and be thankful I'm not calling the police." Emilia stood there, stunned. Lauren leaned against the doorframe and watched the scene with a satisfied smile. Her plan had worked perfectly. Emilia gathered her belongings, an old bag with clothes and a tin box with money, and left the mansion into the cold Seattle rain. She had lost her job, her stability, almost everything she had saved over the years. But a fire burned in her heart. She couldn't forgive herself if Sofia stayed in this hell. Sitting at the bus stop, Emilia looked at the wet streets of the city. Her thoughts were with the girl. "I'll find a way," she told herself, clenching her fists. She remembered Miguel Sanchez, the detective she had once met in a cafe when he was helping Rosa with a petty theft. He seemed honest and principled. Maybe he could help? Emilia took out her phone and dialed Rosa's number. "I need Miguel." "It's urgent," she said when the cook answered. Rosa hesitated. "Emilia, are you sure? It's dangerous." But Emilia was adamant. "I won't back down." The rain intensified, pounding on the roof of the bus stop. Emilia knew she was getting involved in a game where she had almost no chance against Jacob and Lauren. But the nanny's betrayal and her employer's indifference overcame her fear. She was no longer just a maid. She had become someone who would fight for Sofia. Let it cost her her job. Let her be alone against everyone. But hope was born in her heart. The truth would find a way out, and she would do everything to make it happen legally. Emilia Rodriguez sat on a bus stop bench in the cold Seattle rain, clutching an old bag with her belongings. Her fingers were shaking, not from the cold, but from anger and despair. She had just lost her job at the Wilson mansion, been fired in disgrace on false charges by Lauren, and her dream of owning her own home, which she had been saving for years, seemed further away than ever. But Emilia's thoughts were not about herself. They revolved around Sofia, the 3-year-old girl left behind in that huge, cold house with her indifferent father and cruel nanny. She couldn't abandon her. Not now. Rain drummed on the roof of the bus stop, and a plan formed in Emilia's mind. She remembered Miguel Sanchez, the detective with dark eyes and a calm voice whom she had met a couple of months ago in a cafe on the outskirts of town. He had helped Rosa, the cook from the mansion, deal with a petty theft in her house. Miguel was not the kind of man who turned a blind eye to injustice. Emilia took out her phone, her fingers sliding across the wet screen. She dialed Rosa's number. "I need Miguel." "Urgently," she said, barely able to control the tremor in her voice. Rosa hesitated. "Emilia, you're getting involved in something dangerous. Jacob is not someone you want to mess with." But Emilia cut her off. "I can't leave Sofia there. Help me." An hour later, she was sitting in a small cafe in downtown Seattle, across from Miguel. He arrived in a leather jacket, with a light stubble and a tired but attentive look. Emilia told him everything: how Jacob yelled at her daughter, how Lauren left Sofia hungry and even covered her with a pillow to muffle her cries, how she herself was accused of theft and kicked out. Miguel listened silently, taking notes in his notebook. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. "This is serious, Emilia. But without proof, the police won't get involved. Jacob Wilson is an influential man. He has connections. We need facts." Emilia clenched her fists. "I saw everything with my own eyes." "Isn't that enough?" Miguel shook his head. "The word of a maid against a millionaire? The judge won't even listen. We need recordings, witnesses, something substantial." He fell silent, looking at her. "But I believe you. Let's try to find a way out." Emilia nodded, feeling a faint spark of hope ignite in her chest. For the first time in days, she wasn't alone. Meanwhile, life went on as usual in the mansion. Lauren, confident of her victory, continued to flirt with Jacob, while Sofia grew quieter, as if she were dissolving into the walls of the house. But fate had an unexpected twist in store. Despite her fears, Rose decided to help. She called Emilia in the evening. "I spoke to one of Natalie Wilson's old friends. She knows where she is now. Natalie is in Portland, hiding from Jacob. I gave her your number." Emilia froze. "Natalie? Sofia's mother?" Rose confirmed. "Yes. She didn't leave without a reason. Jacob threatened to take everything from her, her business, her daughter. Maybe she can help." The next day, Emilia's phone rang. The voice on the other end was tired but firm. "This is Natalie Wilson. Rose said you know what's going on with my daughter." Emilia told her everything, leaving out no detail. Natalie was silent, her breathing becoming heavier. Finally, she said, "I'm coming back to Seattle. We're going to get Sofia. But I want to do it legally." Emilia felt relieved. An ally, and what an ally, the girl's mother. 2 days later, Natalie showed up in town. A tall woman with short dark hair and a determined look, she looked exhausted but ready for battle. They met at Miguel's office, who had already started digging into Jacob. Natalie revealed her story. "I left because he threatened me with divorce and court. Wilson Tech is my business. I built it from scratch, and he wanted to take it away with fake documents. I was afraid for Sofia, but I thought he would at least take care of her." Emilia shook her head. "He doesn't care. And Lauren is making things even worse." Miguel proposed a plan: gather evidence and take them to court. "Jacob has cameras in the house. If we can get footage of him or Lauren leaving Sofia alone, that'll be proof," he said. Natalie nodded. "I know the security system codes, but we need someone on the inside." Emilia straightened up. "Rosa, she's still there. I'll talk to her." Miguel warned. Jacob could bribe witnesses or the judge. Be prepared for a dirty fight. Rosa agreed to help, even though she was afraid. The next evening, she secretly turned on the cameras in the nursery and living room, recording Lauren leaving Sofia crying while she went out drinking with Jacob. The files were sent to Miguel, who began preparing the case. Natalie filed a lawsuit against her husband, accusing him of negligence, child abuse, and business fraud. The trial became a bombshell in Seattle, with local newspapers splashed with headlines like "Millionaire versus Wife. Who will get the child?" But Jacob wasn't going to give up. He hired the best lawyers and bribed several employees of the mansion to give false testimony against Emilia and Natalie. Carla, succumbing to pressure, testified in court that Emilia had made it all up for the money. Emilia sat in the courtroom listening to her former colleague lie and felt the ground slipping away beneath her feet. Miguel squeezed her hand. "We'll find a way out. We'll prove the truth." Natalie, pale with anger, whispered, "He won't break us." The tension reached its peak when Jacob's lawyer presented a fake video of Emilia allegedly stealing silver. The courtroom gasped, and the judge frowned. Emilia jumped up. That's a lie. I never stole anything. Miguel quickly intervened. We have the camera footage. The real thing. He handed the files to the court clerk, and the courtroom fell silent in anticipation. The judge announced a recess to review the evidence. Emilia, Natalie, and Miguel went outside, where rain was washing the dust off the sidewalks. We're almost there, Miguel said, looking at Emilia with a warm smile. She nodded, but deep down she knew the battle wasn't over yet. Jacob and Lauren sat in the mansion, confident that money and power would save them. But they didn't know that the truth, backed by the recordings and the determination of 3 people, had already begun to tear their world apart. Emilia looked at the wet city, feeling her exhaustion give way to hope. She had done everything she could without breaking the law. Now all she could do was wait and believe that justice would prevail. Emilia Rodriguez stood in front of the courthouse in downtown Seattle, watching the raindrops run down the glass windows. Her heart was beating unevenly. Today, not only Sofia's fate was being decided, but also her own belief in justice. Next to her, Miguel Sanchez, a detective with tired but determined eyes, checked his phone, waiting for news from the court clerk. Natalie Wilson, tall and tense, nervously fiddled with the sleeve of her coat. They were waiting for the verdict after a week of hearings where truth had battled lies backed by Jacob Wilson's money. Emilia clenched her fists. We did everything we could, right? Miguel nodded. Now it's up to the judge. The trial had become a sensation. Seattle newspapers were full of headlines. Scandal in a millionaire's family. Nanny versus maid, and Wilson Tech under attack. Jacob, confident of victory, sat in the courtroom with a smug smile as his lawyers waved around a fake video of Emilia allegedly stealing silver. Lauren, dressed in a strict suit, played the victim, claiming that Emilia was jealous of her position. But Miguel turned the tide by presenting real footage from the mansion's security cameras. It showed Lauren leaving Sofia alone, hungry and crying, while Jacob drank with the nanny in the guest room, ignoring his daughter. The courtroom gasped when the footage showed a pillow over the girl's face, a cruel way to silence her cries. The judge, an elderly woman with a stern gaze, retired to consult with her colleagues. The hours dragged on agonizingly. Emilia, Natalie, and Miguel sat in the hallway, silently exchanging glances. Finally, the courtroom door opened and the clerk called everyone back in. The judge looked up from her papers. Based on the evidence presented, the court finds Jacob Wilson guilty of negligence and child abuse. Custody of Sofia Wilson is transferred to Natalie Wilson. Wilson Tech is returned to its rightful owner, Mrs. Wilson, due to proven fraud on the part of the defendant. The courtroom erupted, and Jacob jumped up, shouting, "This is absurd." But his lawyers just bowed their heads. The game was lost. Emilia felt tears burning in her eyes. She looked at Natalie, who squeezed her hand. "Thank you, Emilia. I couldn't have done it without you." Miguel smiled. "We did it together." Lauren, having lost all her self-confidence, slipped out of the courtroom without saying a word. Later, it became known that she had left Seattle, leaving behind only a trail of shame. Jacob's fate was different. Having lost his business and his daughter, he went into hiding when the police began investigating his financial machinations. The truth that Emilia had sought for so long had finally prevailed. A few days later, Natalie invited Emilia to her mansion. The house, once gloomy and cold, now seemed alive. Sofia was playing in the garden, laughing, while Natalie watched her from the terrace. "I fired everyone who supported Jacob," Natalie said, pouring tea. "Anya won't be coming back. I want to start over." She handed Emilia a thick envelope. "This is for you, for everything you've done for Sofia. It's enough for your house." Emilia opened the envelope and froze. Inside was a sum of money she could never have dreamed of. "Natalie, I don't know what to say," she whispered. Natalie smiled. "Say you'll stay with us. Sofia loves you." But Emilia knew that her time in this house was over. She thanked Natalie and left, clutching the envelope. A week later, she stood in front of a small cottage in the suburbs of Seattle. White walls, a red roof, a small garden with a swing. Natalie's money covered the entire cost, and for the first time in her life, Emilia felt at home. She opened the door, breathed in the smell of fresh paint, and laughed. This was her victory, her triumph. Miguel became a frequent guest at her new home. Their connection, which began in the fight for justice, grew into something more. One evening, he arrived with a bouquet of daisies and a bottle of wine. They sat on the porch, watching the sunset over Puget Sound. Miguel took her hand. "Emilia, I'm not good with words, but will you marry me?" Her heart skipped a beat, then began to race. "Yes, Miguel," she replied, and they embraced in the warm light of the fading day. A month later, they were married in a small church on the outskirts of town, surrounded by friends and laughter. Natalie didn't forget about them either. She won all the court cases against Jacob, regained her business, and restored her reputation. Sofia grew up happy, surrounded by her mother's care. One day, Natalie invited Emilia and Miguel to visit. They sat in the garden while the girls swung on the carousel, and Natalie raised her glass. To you. Into a new beginning. Emilia smiled. To Sofia. Miguel added. To justice. They clinked glasses, and at that moment Emilia realized that everything had been worth it. Her life had changed forever. The cottage became her and Miguel's nest, where they made plans for the future. Miguel told her the latest news. Jacob had been found in Mexico, where he had been hiding from the authorities, and now he was awaiting trial for fraud. Lauren had disappeared, and no one knew where she was. Emilia listened, but her thoughts were elsewhere, on how far she had gone for a little girl, on how the law had helped her win. One day, sitting in the garden of her home, Emilia looked at the swing that Miguel had made with his own hands. She imagined their own children playing there one day and smiled. Her dream of a home had come true, but she had gained so much more: a family, love, and the confidence that good triumphs if you fight for it honestly. Sofia was safe, Jacob and Lauren got what they deserved, and Emilia could finally breathe easy. It was her triumph, not a loud one, but a real one.